How'd you think the men felt about that? So we have to do what you tell us to do, otherwise we're anti-you. Thought that worked? Do y'all know anything about most men? Think that's gonna work?
What in the hell is wrong with the boy? Can't play. The boy can't. No, the boy can't play. No, he showed promise. Bad feet, bad hands, out here looking like Slava Medvedenko. Get him out of here. Hi, my name is Reese Waters. Shout out to all the new subscribers and members here on the channel. This is Who Raised Y'all, where we highlight those unique individuals going above and beyond to make our society worse. You know, the kinds of people you'll see asking to speak to the manager at the pearly gates. ESPN's own Stephen A. Smith, who had a whole lot to say before the election. We addressed that.
When you see the law enforcement, the court system, and everything else being exercised against him, it is something that black folks throughout this nation can relate to.
A few moments later.
For that, I sincerely apologize.
Oh, this gonna be good.
I'm stating right here for the record that my words were taken out of context.
Well, naturally, after the election, he would have some prescient thoughts, saying the thing that everybody thinks but won't say out loud, like blaming Michelle Obama. Oh, we'll get there.
I was surprised at how lopsided it was. I was not surprised by the outcome. Mm-hmm. Right. I saw the outcome coming from a mile away. You have to take into account, listen, we respect our president, Joe Biden, but here's the reality. He got into office. He promised to be a transitional president, to be a stopgap to pave the way for somebody else to come on board. Into the midterms, it was supposed to be a red wave. It did not happen. The Democrats was flying high. He felt the momentum because he was the incumbent. And instead of leaving, he decided to stay. Yeah. When he decided to stay, the Democrats were in a quandary because they were expecting him to leave. Now he wants to stay. They're around him. They're seeing the fastball has dissipated to some degree. They're seeing that he's not what he used to be. And what do you do about it? You grease the skids. There's no primary for him to experience. You let him go on stage June 27th, and clearly he was exposed. 3.5 weeks later, he's forced and compelled to step away because donors to the Democratic establishment, they were not going to support that.
Now, the thing that Stephen A. Smith is describing is the difference between macroscopic and microscopic. You looking at things on the ground. He feels good. We just had this big victory in November, and you lose the big picture, which is you are 80 plus, and you are running in 2 years to take over the country for the next 4 years. So it's not how you feel now. It's can you prove to people in 2 years that you're going to be fit in 6 years. That is missing the big picture. The scenario that he laid out was 100% right.
But you can't overcome that kind of situation. And remember, there's 2 C words that are incredibly important in America. Capitalism is one. Mm-hmm. Competition is another, because it's a metaphor for capitalism in a lot of people's eyes. Because you were inserted, even though you were the vice president and it was the Biden-Harris administration, you had folks who are independent. I'm not talking about those on the right, and I'm not talking about those on the left, just independents, who said, wait a minute, she didn't experience a primary either. And the last time we saw her in a primary was 4 years ago, and she didn't even make it to Iowa. They used that as an excuse to point to her level of inexperience.
Nonsense. 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 If you want to use that as an excuse to vote back in the guy who you had to go to court to remove in the first place, you would have taken any excuse. You would have gone with her tan pantsuit if it fit.
Ladies, enough with the pantsuit. You don't win the office. Like on policy, you know? You gotta whore it up a little.
And you had Trump using codes. Look, do you want her? Where is she? Where's the interviews? Where's she showing herself? Where's the tough questions? Where's the interrogation? And he leaned on certain things. And you knew people were gonna gravitate to that.
What are those things? Huh? What are those things? Don't tell me he leaned on certain things. What did he lean on, Stephen A? What did he lean on?
Most of America doesn't operate on the fringes. Whether you're left or you're right, you're relatively centrist. You believe in compromise, negotiation, working with one another. Nobody gets to get everything they want. The problem is those on the fringes continuously push for you to get everything you want.
Yeah.
They're not about getting things done. They're about getting their way. And if they're not going to get their way, they're about complaining and griping about it because they understand that when you are operating based off of grievance, that's usually what provokes you to get to the polls. And that is why they don't mind feeling aggrieved and displaying and disseminating that kind of message, because they know people are going to gravitate to that. And as a result, that might get them to the polls, you thinking you're going to get what you want as a result of it. And in this particular case, the Republicans were right.
I find it a little odd, though, that he said that America thought that the Democrats had been pushed too far to the fringes on the left, when you have the fringes on the right that are literally driving their entire agenda for an upcoming Trump presidency. We have people from the fringe on the right that are actually in Congress right now verbalizing their unwillingness to compromise in any way. It's funny that we would talk about the fringes on the left when the right fringe has been deeply problematic for a decade and now is on the precipice of passing legislation that is not in the best interest or even what the American people voted for in this or the last election.
Let's put Donald Trump's victory in perspective. He reclaimed the White House with a unique campaign that relied heavily on a voter turnout operation that focused on one familiar issue, the economy. In addition to that, the president-elect managed to peel votes away from once reliable Democratic support groups such as the Latinos and, of course, black men. If you look at that number right there in the CNN exit polls, the Hispanic vote for Trump increased by 13% from what it was in 2020 when he lost to President Joe Biden. With the black community, according to that same CNN poll, it increased by 5%. And obviously, when you hear 5%, you're automatically going to deduce that it was black men that ultimately hurt Kamala Harris.
Actually, let's put those percentages in a different context. I don't really think it would be appropriate to put black support alongside Latino support when he literally won Latino men. Let's call that what it is. Ain't no both sidesism to this one.
Donald Trump's return to the White House is the greatest comeback probably in American history. 34 felony counts, 2 impeachments. I can't count the number of mistakes that he has made. When he departed in 2020 after the insurrection at the United States Capitol, we all thought he was finished. He was done. He went back to his hub at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, and the next thing you know, plotted a return to the White House that, regardless of what they tried to throw in his direction, nothing worked. Nothing worked. Now, we could say what we want about his policies, whatever they may be. We could say what we want about his character, whatever you want to say. But when you think about leaders, one of the primary elements you're looking for from them is fight.
I think it's ironic that he mentions policy, character, and fight alongside one another, because he definitely is full of one of those things. No policy or character to speak of, but he absolutely is full of fight. I'll give you that. He is absolutely full of fight, because when you are on the precipice of being held accountable for your misdeeds, you kind of got no choice. When I think of great comebacks, well, I really think of Doug Williams in the Super Bowl against John Elway. But if it had been charges, if we was down 10-0 in charges, oh, they would have threw him away and locked away the key. And that's why that whole "he's like us" was always nonsense. There's only a certain segment of our population that even has the ability to come back, that even has the freedom of, I don't know, the White House available to you with 34 felonies. I mean, really, who could do that? A rich white guy.
So when you got to go into the lion's den and deal with adversity, you're more than capable of doing so. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if any of us can definitively say we could deal with what Donald Trump dealt with and still end up back in the White House.
I mean, I couldn't. I know I could. My wife and daughter and mother and sister definitely couldn't.
He was definitely helped by Joe Rogan's endorsement in the wee hours before the election began, or before election day began. That played a role. He had some celebrities supporting him. I don't think that played much of a role. But ultimately, his focus on the economy and inflation ravaging us all, combined with the border issues, immigration, and over 11 to 12 million migrants entering the country illegally, and focusing on that, I thought that there were certain things that he did that were nothing short of brilliant.
Ooh, brilliant. Oh, is this what you call brilliant?
People running, 22 Democrats, they're running. Oh, I'm looking at my hair up there. Let's see. Oh, I don't like it. I don't like it. Excuse me, I'm going to recomb my hair. Do you mind?
And I also find it laughable you said he focused on, because you gotta focus. You gotta focus in order to focus on something. If anything, I would say that these are things that he would occasionally bring up. But for the most part, the primary focus of that campaign was misinformation. Or should I say disinformation, because I think he knows better. If there was a focus, it'd be Al Capone, Hannibal Lecter, windmills and sharks, and disinformation. That was definitely the focus.
I have been on the record stating on several occasions, the economy was one thing. I just talked to you about that. Immigration was another. I just talked to you about that. What about crime in the streets? When you look at New York City, when you look at Los Angeles, when you look at the fact that people were being arrested and the same day they were put in jail, they were getting out. And there seemed to be no punitive damage that was being suffered by those who were inflicting harm upon American citizens. What about that? Okay. And then we have to pay attention to woke culture and the cancel culture.
Now, I just talked about misinformation and disinformation, and there's no better example of it than where he went next, where he talked about crime, which is statistically down nationwide, and specifically in a lot of these metropolises, including Los Angeles. However, the more you repeat that crime is an issue, completely disingenuous, the more you repeat that, especially if people are locked into this particular echo chamber and they don't have access, or maybe don't have the willingness to find access to good quality information, then that becomes the fact. That doesn't make that an actual effective issue for you. that speaks to the power of misinformation and disinformation. That is, or shall I say, lying. That's what we used to just call it lying. They got all new fancy words for lying now. But when you can point to a couple of crimes in the face of the statistical decrease, and people focus on those couple of crimes, because I mean, with this many people in America, you can always find a couple of crimes. I didn't know it was supposed to be 0. So when you can focus on a couple of crimes as opposed to the statistical fact, how do you compete with that, Democratic Party?
Think about the commercials that Donald Trump was showing. Think about the commercials that involved Charlemagne the God and the Breakfast Club, when they kept playing footage of Kamala Harris saying she was in support of transgender operations taking place even for those incarcerated, while incarcerated. Think about that. Think about how they leaned on her appearing on The View, and when The View, a liberal outlet, very supportive of Kamala Harris, asked her a simple question of what, if anything, she would do differently from Joe Biden, she said there was nothing she could think of. These are the kind of things that I think hurt her, okay? But I also lean on woke culture and cancel culture for this reason as well. They also brought up how somebody transitioning from being a male to a female were competing against women and young ladies, knowing that there were an abundance of people, not just on the right, but independents, who would not support that. They weren't going to support that. They looked at something like that and they said, what the hell is wrong with us? They hearkened back to years ago when you had people getting in trouble because instead of saying him or her, or he or she, if you didn't say they, it was a violation. And ultimately, that could get you in some kind of trouble.
Now, what I find ironic and fascinating about this, and I've talked about the obsession that the right seems to have with this trans issue, which, as I've continued to post these videos on a daily basis, I've not focused on that, not one time. I've actually only brought it up in response to them regurgitating it. So apparently this is something that they are deeply focused on and deeply intrigued by, which makes me think of two things. One, the fact that this is an issue that is so far entrenched to the fringes of the left wing, yet the fringes of the left wing talk about how she ran to the center, how she ran to the right. This, to me, speaks to the breakdown and deeply troubling issues that the Democratic Party has in messaging, because they were successful in framing Kamala Harris as this extreme leftist, but nobody remotely left of center would characterize her that way, and especially not the extreme left. Those are the kind of people who couldn't even show up to the polls because they were uncommitted. Those were the people that they were successfully able to frame her with on the right. The other thing it makes me think about is just how deeply unserious we are as a population. We are a population that was preoccupied with a couple of naturally born men maybe playing women's sports somewhere in America than the eradication of women's bodily autonomy, the gutting of voting rights, or the gutting of environmental protections. You're perfectly fine giving away women's bodily autonomy and throwing our environment and the world our children will inherit on the craps table, as long as you make sure that she always has to play with women. She don't got freedom over her choices about her own body. She can't go outside because of the smog, but at least it's an all-women's soccer team.
There are many, many things to insult Donald Trump about. There are many times we could have done it in the past. We can't do it today. There ain't a damn thing we can say. America has spoken. The Republicans have the White House. They have the Senate, by the way. They won back the Senate. They flipped it. And they're probably going to retain the House.
So let me get this straight. Because the vote went the way that it did, that makes him not guilty of all the things that we've seen? Does that make him innocent? Does that make him virtuous? Does that make him? I'm trying. What do you mean we can't say anything about? What is that? So whoever's in the White House or whoever runs the Senate is unimpeachable? Because it's been a litany of horrific characters that have emerged from both, Stephen A. I think you know that.
All these celebrities, Taylor Swift, Michelle Obama, Jennifer Lopez, Beyonce, Oprah. The list went on and on and on. Let me tell you what the problem with all of that was. Let's not forget LeBron James, even though he just put out a tweet. Let me tell you what the problem with that was.
I would love to hear this. I would love to hear this, what the problem with that was. One, because you already asserted that it was helpful that Joe Rogan endorsed Donald Trump. Number two, Donald Trump had his own celebrity endorsements. Number three, he has clearly secured the support and very aggressive support of a number of very visible billionaires, including the guy who won't shut up or stop jumping up and down. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, if the celebrities are alienating, what exactly is Elon Musk? This should be good.
Let me tell you what the problem with that was. Michelle Obama giving a speech in Kalamazoo where she skillfully and brilliantly detailed reproductive rights. Wasn't talking about abortion. She was talking about reproductive rights for women. Fair enough. But then she added a line by saying a vote for him was a vote against us. Don't believe what I'm saying? Take a listen.
We are the ones with the knowledge and experience to know what we need. So please do not hand our fates over to the likes of Trump, who knows nothing about us, who has shown deep contempt for us. Because a vote for him is a vote against us, against our health, against our worth.
You see what Michelle Obama said right there? I'm here to tell you that I believe if Michelle Obama was running, she would have won this election by a landslide. She's that popular. She's that skilled. She's a brilliant orator. She's a wonderful woman, the greatest first lady I think this country has ever seen. But when she added that line, how do you think American citizens felt? So in other words, if we don't agree with you, we're against you. It didn't affect me because I'd already voted for Kamala Harris. Might not have affected most women, maybe some. How do you think the men felt about that? So we have to do what you tell us to do, otherwise we're anti-you. Thought that worked? Do y'all know anything about most men? Think that's gonna work?
Okay, well, let me take these one at a time. First, your assertion that Michelle Obama had run, she would have won in a landslide. I had given her props, almost did a whole video about what an amazing job she did on the campaign trail. So don't disagree with you there. As far as the line, if you're not with us, then if you don't vote this way, then you're against us. Now, in a general election, and I don't mean that specifically like the general election, but just a random election, right? Typically, women's abilities to make decisions about their own bodies isn't on the ballot. You know, like typically that's not on the ballot. Typically, you don't have a man found criminally liable for crimes against a woman on the ballot. Generally, that's not, and typically you don't have a campaign rife with overt sexism. Typically, that's also not on the ballot, and also their unwillingness to preserve things like diversity training and DEI and things like that. Typically, that's not on the ballot. Reproductive freedoms, typically not on the ballot. So generally speaking, you wouldn't be able to reliably make that case that if you don't vote in a certain way, then you are anti-us, and in this case, women. In this case, I find it hard to make the argument that anybody reliably informed about the issues and the candidates, like a vice president that's trying to do away with no-fault divorce to keep women stuck in unhappy marriages. I can't really perceive anybody truly on top of the issues and the candidates who would vote that way and not be anti-us. That's this election. And by the way, women aren't the only minority group I would say that about. I would definitely say it about Latinos, and I would definitely say it about us too. As far as your last line about do you know any men? Do you understand how men work? So I guess as opposed to making it clear exactly what the stakes are and deducing it down to the litany of anti-woman stances and saying this is how these things should look to you on the ballot, as opposed to making it clear, they should have just, I guess, just trusted men to do all that research and do that. How has that worked? Not just for men, but just for Americans. How's trusting Americans to do their own work been going?
How about this one from Oprah? Take a listen.
If we don't show up tomorrow, it is entirely possible that we will not have the opportunity to ever cast a ballot again. And let me be very clear. If you do not make sure that the people in your life can get to the polls, that is a mistake. Deciding not to decide, that is most definitely a vote to let other people control your future.
Civil Rights Act of 1964, Voting Rights Act of 1965, been in place since 1965. That's spanning more than nearly 60 years, okay? And you're gonna look an audience in the face and you're going to tell them that if you vote for Donald Trump, you may not ever be able to cast a vote again. Who believed that?
Anybody that was paying attention to what had been said. Wait a minute, I talked about Americans being trusted to do their own research. Stephen A., did you do any research before you came out? You mean to tell me the guy who said you'll never have to vote again just this one time, and when asked to clean that up, refused to do so? Who's empowered the Supreme Court that has eroded voting rights already and has their eye on civil rights already? You mean the Supreme Court that had the nerve to denounce Brown versus Board of Education, which, by the way, predates those two acts that you're referencing? You mean to tell me that I'm supposed to ignore that and just not believe that those are things that could happen, like how we've been treating Roe versus Wade up until this point, that now all of a sudden has gone away? What in the hell is wrong with The boy can't play. The boy can't play. No, he showed promise. Bad feet, bad hands, out here looking like Slava Medvedenko. Get him out of here. And that's not even to mention the protections the founding fathers laid down about campaign finances in order to prevent us from sliding into an oligarchy or keeping the church and state separate. Ain't nothing sacred here.